The United Nations Refugee Agency has just released its yearly report on displaced people worldwide. Last year set another grim record. The agency says there were 123 million forcibly displaced people worldwide last year, and 40% of them were children. Now, that means they were forced to leave their homes because of persecution, war, human rights violations, or other extreme causes. About 73 million people were internally displaced, with 50 million having crossed borders. The countries with the biggest refugee populations were Sudan, Syria, Afghanistan and Ukraine. The UN agency also says refugee numbers dropped slightly so far this year. And to talk about this more, I'm joined here in the studio by Katharina Thote, the UN Refugee Agency's representative here in Germany. A very warm welcome to you. Thank you for your time. Can I start by asking you, Katharina, about what is driving these numbers?
Yes, you've said it, Anya. There are a lot of conflicts worldwide, and some of the main ones are the ones you hear about on the news every day, Syria, Afghanistan. But we are really worried also about the situation in Sudan, which is currently now the biggest displacement crisis worldwide, 14 million people who've had to flee their home.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about how people, and children, of course, because we were talking about the numbers of children who are affected by this. How are they affected by having to flee their homes, by having to leave their home countries?
Yes, the proportion of children forced to flee is much higher among forcibly displaced people than among the general world population. So this is really traumatizing for children, having to leave their home. Many lose family members while they're fleeing, and then when they arrive in the countries where they're being protected, often they don't even have the basic necessities along with their families. But it's really important that we're able to allow children to go to school, to keep schools open, to give them a way to rebuild their lives. But they have a lot of trauma that they're facing and are really in a terrible situation.
Yeah. The number of people forced to flee has doubled in the last decade, we were hearing. Is there anything that can be done, let alone to stop this? Is there anything that can be done to slow this down?
The main solution, of course, is to bring peace to these conflicts, to make sure that the situation is safe again for people to go back to their home countries, back to their villages of origin, which unfortunately is not the case so far. We have seen a slowing down of the trends since last year, also because a lot of people have started to return to some countries, but very often that's actually happening in very difficult circumstances, to places that are not necessarily safe yet or rebuilt. And also in some places it's even happening under duress. So people are being forced to return home, like, for example, to Afghanistan, which is very concerning.
You're the UNHCR's representative here in Germany. I just wanted to ask you, because we're seeing a different picture here. The number of asylum seekers has declined by more than 30%. That was last year. Were you surprised by that?
No, we've seen the numbers already reducing, and it's, of course, very important to remember that the vast majority of people who are forcibly displaced remain in their regions of origin. So 73% are living in low and middle income countries. More than 2/3 remain actually in the immediate neighboring country to where the crisis is happening. So only a fraction of people are actually arriving in Europe and in Germany.
Mm-hmm. If we can talk about the work that the UNHCR does, obviously it needs money in order to support these people. Now, it is, I hear, facing the largest funding crisis in its 75-year history. Can you talk to us about how that is impacting your work and what you can do?
Yes, you've said it before. The number of displaced people has doubled in the last 10 years, but we actually only have the same level of funding available now that we had 10 years ago. So we as UNHCR and also many other humanitarian organizations have had to cut back our programs by about 1/3, and that just means that those 123 million people are not getting even the most basic humanitarian assistance that they need to receive, and we're not able to provide that.
What about the prospects for future funding? I mean, is there the possibility, or do you see the possibility of getting more funding?
We really do hope that some of the funding will be restored from some of the countries that have announced the cutbacks. We also hope that private donations will at least help us cover some of that, but it's clear that it's such a big gap is impossible to completely cover, and the people who are bearing the brunt of that are the refugees and displaced people.
And the needs are obviously growing. There is one positive aspect of your report. The number of displaced people who were able to return to their home countries did rise slightly. Is that cause for hope? Is this a trend that we're seeing?
Yeah, 9.8 million people did return home. You've mentioned it. That's more than in the past few decades, actually. But we are still worried because many of them are returning under conditions that are far less from ideal, and it's not sure that they will be able to stay there. So if they're, for example, someone who was a refugee in Sudan is now returning to South Sudan, where the situation is also very unstable, and there are actually people being newly displaced. So is that a situation that is that a cause for hope? I don't know. So we really need to make sure that that peace is being pursued in these situations, so that people can return home safely and rebuild their lives there.
Katharina Thote, UNHCR's representative here in Germany. Katharina, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.